The conversation around the new JN.1 variant of COVID is getting louder, not just here in India, but across the world, Malaysia being the latest country to join in. Here in India, 594 cases have been reported in the last 24 hours, which just, by the way, is slightly lower than what we saw yesterday. Of these cases, 300 are from Kerela. In the last 24 hours, 6 deaths have been recorded as well. 3 in Kerala, 2 in Karnataka and 1 in Punjab. Till now, as we speak, 23 confirmed cases of the JN1 variant have been reported. 19 of them are coming from one state, the state of Goa, a state which gets very, very active and sees travelers and people from all across India and the world fly in during New Year and Christmas festivities. That is just around the corner. States across India have stepped up vigil. In Uttar Pradesh's Ghaziabad, citizens have been asked to use face masks and maintain social distancing. Chandigarh too has advised masks in public places. Karnataka was the first state to make masks mandatory for the elderly and those with comorbidities. The state has now ramped up testing as well. As cases surge in neighbouring Kerala, 300 in the last 24 hours, Karnataka's Chief Minister Siddaramaiah has chaired a key meeting on the overall COVID situation in the state today and has said that citizens must not panic.
Today, myself, Deputy Chief Minister, Home Minister, Health Minister, Medical Education Minister and other officers of the Health Department and also the members of the Technical Advisory Committee. We met today and discussed so many things. We have taken a decision that this disease, we need not be panic. People need not be panic. But precautionary measures will have to be taken. Wherever there are groups and in gatherings, in such places, everybody should wear mask.
माइल्ड वेरिएंट है, ज़्यादा चिंता की बात नहीं है, लेकिन प्रिकॉशन प्रिवेंशन इज ऑलवेज बेटर देन क्योर। राज्यों को एडवाइजरी दी गई है, कल मंत्रियों स्वास्थ्य मंत्रियों से और मुख्यमंत्रियों से वार्ता हुई। इसके अलावा ये कहा गया कि आंकड़े जरूर उपलब्ध कराएं और स्क्रीनिंग ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा करनी चाहिए।
आप कहेंगे कि मास्क सबको पहनना शुरू कर देना चाहिए, शुड दैट बी ऑल्सो?
देखिए, मास्क तो अभी इस वाले से JN-1 से वो है, लेकिन आप देखो पॉल्यूशन के हिसाब से भी मास्क पहनना चाहिए और कई मास्क से कई चीज़ों की सावधानी रहती।
तो आप हर 15 दिन में स्टेट से क्या उनकी रिपोर्ट लेंगे? कोई ऐसा डिसाइड हुआ है किस टाइम फ्रेम में रिपोर्ट लेनी है? डेली बेसिस पर होगी?
डेली बेसिस पर जो पोर्टल है उस पर आंकड़े जरूर रोज आते हैं और रोज ही नहीं आते हैं, हर घंटे के आते हैं, तो हम लोग मॉनिटरिंग कर रहे हैं।
In the past few weeks, the number of COVID cases is increasing. If you look at respiratory illnesses in general, the contribution of COVID is much greater in December compared to November, and that was much greater than in October. In August, September and October, very, very few COVID cases were there, almost absent even after testing. But that changed since November and December. Fortunately, most of these people are not requiring hospitalization. That's because most of the COVID cases are now occurring in the people who are traveling and who are well enough to go to work or to study.
Let me go straight across to my colleague Deepak, who is joining us from Bangalore. Deepak, Karnataka had become the first state in the country to mandate masks, at least for the elderly citizens. Now you're seeing other places say not issue and not issue mandates, but certainly say, look, if you can, please wear masks. I want to ask you what the situation as far as COVID is concerned in the state of Karnataka is, and do you think, given the fact that there is, there is Christmas around the corner, there is New Year festivities around the corner, we'll see a wider mask mandate in the state?
Well, Shreya, as on today, we are waiting for a health bulletin that will come in very shortly. 92 cases are positive right now. In that, only 20 people have been hospitalized, and most of them are suffering from comorbidities. This is something that the Chief Minister himself, of course, has said. They have mandated for 60 plus and those with comorbidities to wear masks. They've also said that you did mention, of course, Christmas and New Year is around the corner, and we do, of course, see a huge number of people gather at commercial establishments, bars and pubs. And this is, of course, a huge revenue generator as well for the state government, and they do not want to probably, at this point in time, jump, the gun and say we'll put limitations on the number of people. They're
Correct.
not doing that. They're saying people who go to large gatherings, people who meet a lot of people, wear masks. This is something that they have not mandated. It's given as an advisory. As of now, of course, the testing has been ramped up, and with the testing ramped up, the numbers could only increase because the testing was pretty low. So you could expect the numbers to go up. The Chief Minister himself is saying there's nothing much to panic, but take precautions, especially for those who suffer from underlying illnesses and, also those who are senior citizens as well.
All right, we leave it there. Deepak, thank you very much. Deepak, of course, joins you at 7 this evening with the top stories from the south. Thanks, Deepak. Gurpreet, you're joining us from Chandigarh this evening. Could you just help clarify what exactly the administration of Chandigarh is saying? Has it made masks mandatory in public, or is it simply advising people to wear masks in public?
Well, what we have learned from the UT administration, they say as of now, this is the advisory which has been given and issued to the people of Chandigarh. Because in Chandigarh, there are much crowded places and a lot of malls where we have seen huge gatherings every day. So that's why they had given such type of direction. The way this new virus has already been starting spreading in the various parts of the country, they wanted to take a precaution. What we have learned from the administration, if the people are not going to follow this advisory, they will make it mandatory, and then they will impose some fine those who are not going to wear these masks. So as of now, it seems that it's an advisory to the people, and specifically on the crowded places, they have recommended that everybody should wear masks so that this corona, new variant of corona, should not spread in the Chandigarh, not only in Chandigarh, even in the pockets of Punjab also. So let's see that how they are going to make a strategy in the coming days.
Okay, we'll leave it there for the moment. Gurpreet, thank you very much. Once things are not mandated, people tend to take it lightly. I would advise all our viewers to not take these advisories lightly, especially if people around you are falling sick. And you will see, if you just look around, that people around you are falling sick. They have fever, they will have a throat ache, they will probably have headaches, a back pain, all these symptoms of the new variant that we are talking about, JN.1. So the government so far has said two things. A, don't panic, and that infections are mild so far. What are they basing this analysis on? Let's look at Singapore, where in the end of November, COVID cases had started surging. Not all, by the way, were the new variant. The small nation of 5.5 million people, well, the COVID figures there went from 3,000 end of November to 7,813 days. Now, this was definitely a surge, and a surge that had a very sharp peak. It peaked in just 13 days. If you remember the earlier curves that we saw, the peak came in 30 to 40 days. In this case, there was a sharp rise, there was a peak, and then there was a fall. The pictures and the graph is on your screens. Now, Singapore did make masks mandatory, but let's also keep in mind that Singapore's hospitalizations in these 13 days were very, very low. So is Singapore's experience telling India something? I'm asking that question to Professor Vidyasagar from IIT Hyderabad, who's joining me on the broadcast. He's someone who looks at data and graphs very closely. Professor M. Vidyasagar, thank you very much for your time here on Mirror Now. It's good to have you here. Could I ask you first things first, and let's just put the map of Singapore back on our screens. I think that will give our viewers a better understanding of what we are talking about. Now, there is a mapping for the cases in Singapore from the end of November to, say, 13th, 14th of December, by which the surge had peaked. Does what we are seeing on our screens, does the Singapore example hold any lessons for India? Does it tell India what we could possibly be in for?
Yes. So the Singapore government Ministry of Health has a website which has a plot of the number of cases, a 7-day moving average, and I have shared that with your office. I hope you will show that. Anyway, you
Correct.
can see that what might be called the surge in Singapore started on the 29th of November at approximately 3,000 cases, and then it peaked around the 12th of December at around 7,800 cases. So this is a
Correct.
increase of a factor of about 2.6 over 13 to 14-day period. And this represents a transmission rate, which is known as beta of 0.18, which means that if an infected person comes in contact with a susceptible person, the likelihood that the susceptible person gets infected is around 18%. Now, you have to understand that for Singapore, this is a huge number of cases. Singapore has only 5.5 million people. So 7,000 cases is about 0.14% or 0.13% of the population. If you extrapolate that to India, this is like 1.6 to 1.7 million cases per day. So obviously they had a situation on their hands. But at the same time, you can see that the peak has been reached, and the moving average of cases is now down. And in fact, yesterday they recorded only 4,500 cases, which is sharply down from the peak. So based on this somewhat limited data, one can conclude two things. First of all, that the spread rate of this JN.1 is comparable to the original Wuhan virus, which we had in India during the first wave in 2020, which also had the same beta of 0.18. But the very vicious Delta wave that we had in India in 2021 had a beta of 0.39, more than twice as much. So if when the pandemic, when the virus does come to India, if it has the same spread rate, we can assume that the impact on India would be comparable to what we had in the very, very first wave, and not comparable to what we had in the Delta wave. Of course, as and when it comes to India, we will have better statistics and we can make estimates which are specially tailored to the Indian data. But for now, Singapore is all we have to go on.
Okay. So Singapore is all we have to go on. The set of data is limited. In Singapore, cases in any case have peaked. It infected roughly 0.14% of their population starting November, well, mid-November, you can say. If we extrapolate that data, then India will see 1.7 million cases a day if the virus replicates its behavior in India. Are you telling me that much like Singapore, the number of cases in India then will rise, whenever they start rising, will rise and will peak in 13 days or so, and then start showing a decline without any major hospitalizations?
Well, no, there will definitely be hospitalizations. You can't say there won't be any hospitalization. But see, the Singapore surge started when the number of cases hit about 3,000. Again, to extrapolate that number to India, that will have to be several lakhs of cases in India. And we can do a better job of modeling the Indian situation long before that. Right now, yesterday in India, we had only 621 cases, if I remember correctly. At these small numbers, it is not possible to make any kind of a quantitative prediction. So once it hits us, we can tailor our model for the fact that our immunity rates are different from Singapore, or vaccine penetration in India is different from Singapore, and come up with a revised estimate. But I do think the point you made is quite valid, namely the rapid rise in cases seems to be over. I mean, after about 10, 12 days, the number of cases started coming down, which is somewhat uncharacteristic of the COVID. If you look at the previous waves. Previous waves took about 30, 40 days to go up and then come down. So we don't know if the same phenomenon would hold in India. And if so, the total number of cases would not be very large. But that's a big if, and we have to keep watching the data closely to figure out whether the same thing would apply to us as well.
And right now, our numbers are way too low for us to, really jump the gun. So, are we jumping the gun while advising masks, etc., in India? I mean, in Singapore, the surge actually started in a country of just 5.5 million people. The surge started when the number hit 3,000 and peaked at 7,800. For India, if we extrapolate that data to India, that would run into lakhs. Even if we say that a surge is starting, that surge would have to be, the numbers would have to be 1 or 2 lakhs per day. Is it then too early to issue any sort of mandates on masks and movement?
I would say the following: prudence is always warranted, mandates are not warranted. So, for example, if you're flying in a plane, even before the JN.1 was around, I always used to wear a mask in an airplane. In fact, as soon as I get into the aerobridge, which is a highly confined area, it's a good idea to protect yourself. Within the airport building, ceilings are very high and the air circulation is good. So masks are not necessary. Inside the aircraft, of course, masks are highly desirable. So that point, namely that you should be cautious and wear masks, that does not change in view of this new data. But I think that a mandate saying that you must wear masks or you must do this, or even worse would be something like a curfew, restricting economic activity. I think it is far too early to do any of those.
Okay. So you are advising prudence rather than mandates. Can I then very quickly ask you, if I can, before I let you go, do we have any data on hospitalizations in Singapore? And if that data reflects what India should be prepared for if the worst comes true?
So what has happened is, there is some hospitalization data. They are saying about 400 people have been hospitalized in the past few days. There is always a delay, from the time the infection occurs and then people are hospitalized. So then what it means is that out of 7,000 cases, if 400 people are hospitalized, then approximately 1 in 20 have been hospitalized, which is not extremely serious. But I will hedge my comment and say I will look at the data a bit more closely. But preliminary indications seem to be that hospitalizations may be of the order of 5%.
Okay. Professor Vidyasagar, we'll leave it there for the moment. So 2 important points coming through, given what we have seen in Singapore, because that is the only place from where we are getting data right now. Hospitalizations are low, ladies and gentlemen, which means the government is rightly telling us that, that the infection is mild. It will not require hospitalization, maybe in 5 to 6% people, but no more than that. B, if the virus behaves the way it has behaved in Singapore, and if we do see the numbers rising, then that surge will peak very quickly. In about 12 to 13 days is the Singapore experience, possibly will be replicated here in India as well. So let's see how the virus behaves. For the moment, let me go across to people who have some experience with COVID and the new JN.1 virus, the new variant. Dr. J A Jayalal is a former national president of the IMA, joining us on the broadcast. And Dr. Satish Prasad Rath is a doctor, he's a scientist, he's a founder at the Sanatan and Skids. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Can I please ask you, Dr. J A Jayalal, since you come from the state of Kerala, there are 300 cases right now of COVID being reported from Kerala, the maximum anywhere in the country. Is there any way for us to know how many of them are driven by the new variant? So far, we are being told it's just 29 or 24 or 25, and most of them are coming from Goa. But it's a little hard to believe that of 300 cases in Kerala, maybe 1, 2 or 3 are of the new variant. Could you throw some light on that?
Yeah, I think the Kerala is one, if you remember, even for the first COVID wave, the first case was reported from Kerala. Similarly, now the new wave, which we are thinking of, that is the JN1, is also reported from Kerala. But you see that when we are sending the specimen for examination, we have only the genomic consortium. It is only one place So when the specimens they are testing, the number of specimens they are testing is important. The number of specimens sent from that particular state is also important. Out of the total specimens which they have tested, it's very legible number. In that they have found out it is a 23 cases and only 3 from the Kerala. That doesn't exclude that the Kerala is immune from the JN. But why there is no more increase of the cases in Kerala means probably this one reason is more number of testing. It's also two things we look into the testing. The number of cases positive on testing. But yesterday, if you see, out of 600 samples tested, the Kerala has shown 250 cases positive. That means almost 30% of the sample they are testing is positive. That is a little alarming number. Because many people nowadays, it's a cocktail. They have a cough, they have a cold, they have a body pain. They think it is an influenza. So most people do not come forward for testing. So when you are testing, out of that, Kerala shows 30%. And out of the positive cases, they sent for the consortium for testing the genomic variants, but there it is only less. But that doesn't preclude Kerala. Equally like that, when you say the Singapore, the initial cases when we saw the rise, we were having a less number of JN positive, JN1 positive. The later, when it is a peak only, there is it takes 3-4 days to find out that is the genomic sequence. So JN1 is less, is not a good thing for the Kerala to say. But when the testing is 30% of the samples are getting positive, is a real big word for Kerala, especially in the season of the Christmas and the New Year, the festivity is there all over. We are a little afraid on that.
So, Dr. Satish Prasad Rath, it means that it's not only Kerala that needs to be a little scared right now, it's the rest of the country as well. Because people in Kerala may be good enough to go and get themselves tested, but I know that most people I know at least, will not even bother. Most people in North India will go to their kitchens, drink some haldi doodh and think things will become better. So point is, the numbers that we are showing on our screens, about 500 or 600, is not the real representation of how far and wide the new variant or even COVID has spread.
Right. You're very correct, Shreya, for that. So thanks for having me here. If you think scientifically, as per research-wise, first of all, why WHO calls this as a variant of, let's say, information or not a variant of concern is it has got some mutation which is predicted. So we expect a scientist to COVID to have these kind of mutations. This is in the spike protein, which increases its transmissibility, what we are expecting now also. We saw this in US, we saw this in Singapore. But it's, let's say, immune evasion is not that serious. So most of the people are not going to get very serious. They are not going to get hospitalized. Also, mortality of this variant is not expected to be too bad, right? So, here the next question actually comes is, when we compare between Singapore and, let's say, India, Singapore, we should always remember that, it's a very small country, highly educated country, also a country which has suffered about SARS things, for quite some time. Decades they have suffered for SARS. So whenever they have got a viral infection, they mask up, without any public information. That the very important thing what you say it is, whenever there is a advisory, whoever is having a cough and cold kind of a thing, ideally we should take responsibility as citizens and we should mask up. What I have got actually challenges is when you actually give a public health advisory in a broken manner, like if you are going to, let's say, crowded places, you should mask up. Then people forget actually that, when they return from the crowded place, how many are actually wearing masks or how many are entering the crowded places with masks. And when they are interacting with their elderly at home without masks, then also they are becoming an agent to transmit the disease to the elderly. So people, if we really have to take the responsibility, whenever there's an advisory, we should be really taking it seriously. It will be stopping the transmission. And definitely we don't have to panic. That doesn't mean that, we don't take the responsibility as citizens. So we definitely have to mask up, definitely at the hospitals, at the institutions, at the crowded places, and definitely people with comorbidities and the elderly.
Okay. Very quickly, Dr. Jayalal, can I very quickly, as I wrap this chat, ask you, we've had our own experiences with COVID. We are battle-hardened, as it were. One of the tools that was being used to detect COVID-19 was RT-PCR. Is it now required? is that because we know what we are dealing with, unless you have people who have comorbidities, to people who are suffering from fever, from headache, typical symptoms of JN.1 or even generally COVID, do you advise an RT-PCR test, or do you just advise self-isolate, stay away from people, manage your symptoms and you'll be fine?
No, absolutely no. We need to do RT-PCR because we are dealing with a situation which is a cocktail situation. On one hand, we are having a lot of influenza cases. Another hand, we are having it's a situation is a cold winter season. People will get a common cold. And this three is a subtle variations are there. And though we say there is a cases are not going to cause mortality, if you see Kerala, it's already 3 deaths we have. Because the COVID-induced pneumonia, COVID-induced mortality is happening. Even though it is a little number, we should be cautious. And who are the people who are going to get, especially people with the comorbidity, especially those who have not taken the booster dose, they are all more susceptible for that. So it is our general advice for our statistical purpose and also for predicting how we are going forward. We should do an RT-PCR. Now RT-PCR is being done in a much, much cheaper way in all the government institutions. So when you are in a doubt, when you are suspicion, and it is not only for yourself, it is also for helping your own family members. When you know that you are RT-PCR positive, you will be more isolated. Otherwise, we'll say, okay, just like that, 50-50, you will do the isolation. That is going to be a more harm. So breaking the chain, RT-PCR is more mandatory for us to confirm the case and do appropriately for the necessary things for the patient to survive and escape the things, complications.
Okay, Dr. Jayalal, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much. Dr. Satish Rath, thank you very much for joining us as well. Another thing that the Singapore experience is teaching us is that the symptoms will be managed in 7 to 8 days. So the time of recovery will be 7 to 8 days. And one of the headline features is extreme headaches. And the other headline feature, it seems, in most people in Singapore has been extreme fatigue. So keep an eye out for those 2 symptoms. We'll leave it there. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the broadcast. It was good to have you on the show. It's something that we will keep talking about through this week because we want to see how COVID progresses here in India. Right now, the numbers very, very low. Prudence required, not knee-jerk reactions, not mandates. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. On that note, I'm slipping into a quick break on the show. There's much more on the other side. Do stay with us.